In the depths of the First Age, far beneath the volcanic peaks of Thangorodrim, Morgoth's stronghold of Angband concealed horrors so profound that even the most battle-hardened of the Eldar would shudder at the mere whisper of their existence. Here, Morgoth ruled as a god of terror, his iron crown gleaming with the stolen Silmarils, a bitter mockery of their original purpose, to illuminate and inspire hope. Yet the Silmarils themselves, bright and immortal, pale in comparison to the darker truths hidden within Angband's vast and sinister labyrinth. However, one of the most insidious secrets of Angband was Morgoth's vile manipulation of life itself. The Eldar, particularly the Noldor, often whispered of the origins of the orcs. According to ancient lore, Morgoth took captive elves during the early days of their awakening and twisted them into orcs, corrupting their very essence through unimaginable tortures. This was not merely an act of malice, but a statement against Ilúvatar himself, a blasphemous declaration that Morgoth could unmake and remake life as he saw fit. Tolkien himself confirmed in his letters that the orcs' creation was a dark parody of the children of Ilúvatar. Angband's breeding pits churned with unending misery, a cacophony of shrieks and howls as Morgoth's experiments grew ever more grotesque. Crossbreeds, malformed beings, and monstrous failures were discarded like refuse, their lives extinguished in the cold, ash-ridden halls. The orcs who survived were but shadows of their former selves, filled with a hate that mirrored their master's own. Among Morgoth's most terrifying creations in Angband was Glaurung, the father of dragons, unleashed in the year 260 of the First Age. A creature of immense cunning and malice, Glaurung was the prototype for an even darker, more insidious weapon. The forging of dragons was an act of divine rebellion, blending the fire of owless gifts with Morgoth's own malice. Within Angband's forges, Morgoth imbued these creatures with malevolent will, their fiery breath burning with more than mere heat. It carried Morgoth's rage and despair, domestication, and death, dark void. The psychological torment these creatures inflicted was perhaps their most harrowing feature. Glaurung's hypnotic gaze, for instance, revealed a secret aspect of Morgoth's design, the intent to break wills as much as bodies. Through Glaurung, Morgoth manipulated Turin Turambar, leading him to a fate of tragedy and self-destruction. It is not far-fetched to speculate that Morgoth viewed dragons as more than weapons. They were manifestations of his own desire to corrupt and dominate, lose his way, drop the glass and all views of his own desire, lose his ways, lose the fate of his own men. Deep beneath Angband, its dungeons were an abyss of despair. It was here that Maedhros, eldest son of Feanor, was chained to the cliffs of Thangorodrim. For decades he hung by his wrist, his body broken, but his spirit unyielding. This act was more than physical punishment. It was a psychological message to the Noldor. Morgoth would break their heroes and reduce them to symbols of his dominance. The dungeons also served as prisons for countless others, from elves to men, whose screams echoed in the impenetrable darkness. There is evidence in Tolkien's writings that these prisoners were not simply left to rot. Morgoth took a perverse pleasure in experimenting on them, testing the limits of their endurance and twisting their bodies into new abominations, until there was no one left to shelter them from the gross labors of the prisons of these damnations. He whispered. The theft of the Silmarils was not merely an act of greed, but a calculated strategy to corrupt and destroy. Morgoth understood the depth of Feanor's pride and foresaw the ruin that would follow the oath of Feanor and his sons. In this, Morgoth demonstrated an understanding of the hearts of the children of Ilúvatar that was both brilliant and terrifying. Note both pages. The Silmarils, locked in his iron crown, burned Morgoth's flesh perpetually. This was a direct result of their purity rejecting his corruption. Yet Morgoth endured this agony, for it symbolized his defiance against the Valar and his dominance over the Noldor. The Silmarils, once sacred artifacts, became tools of despair, sowing strife and bloodshed among elves, men, and dwarfs alike. Perhaps one of the most enigmatic elements of Morgoth's dominion in Angband was his ability to wield the very essence of his malice as a weapon. Unlike Sauron's rings of power, Morgoth's influence extended directly through the world itself. This was most evident in the so-called Black Lightning, a manifestation of his will that struck with malevolent precision. This power wasn't natural. It was a perversion of the Song of the Ainur, and its effects were as insidious as they were devastating. It is said that in the Battle of Sudden Flame, the lightning struck with supernatural precision, setting ablaze vast tracts of Ardgalen and signaling Morgoth's offensive against the Noldor. More chilling, however, was its psychological effect. Those who survived spoke of a despair so profound that it broke even the stoutest hearts. The Black Lightning was Morgoth's declaration that there was no safe refuge from his hatred. Though Sauron is often credited with the creation of werewolves, their origin lies in Morgoth's dark halls. Sauron, then Morgoth's most loyal lieutenant, perfected the craft of binding spirits to beasts. Within Angband, experiments combined the ferocity of wolves with the intelligence of corrupted Maiar. Draugluin, the first and greatest of the werewolves, became the prototype for countless others. What made these creatures truly horrific was their unnatural hunger, not merely for flesh, but for torment. As agents of Morgoth's will, they prowled the borders of Angband, instilling dread and sowing chaos. The werewolves also served as a grim reflection of Morgoth's broader strategy: to distort and destroy the natural order, creating perverse echoes of Iluvatar's original designs. Now, Angband was more than a fortress. It was a living embodiment of despair. Morgoth infused its very walls with his essence, creating a pervasive atmosphere of fear and shadow. The Silmarillion describes how the light of the trees of Valinor, once captured in the Silmarils, was entirely extinguished within Angband. This deliberate suppression of light symbolized Morgoth's rejection of creation itself, a desire to return the world to the void from which it was formed. The shadows of Angband were not ordinary darkness. They were imbued with Morgoth's hatred, sapping the strength and resolve of all who entered. Even the bravest warriors were struck by an inexplicable paralysis, a physical manifestation of their deepest fears. This mastery of shadow extended beyond Angband, as evidenced by the constant gloom that hung over northern Middle-earth, a reminder of Morgoth's reach. The Balrogs, fiery spirits corrupted by Morgoth, were another secret weapon hidden within Angband's depths. While the Balrogs are remembered for their terrifying appearance during the Wars of the First Age, their origins as Maiar corrupted by Morgoth reveal a deeper horror. Angband was their sanctuary, where they lay dormant, awaiting their master's call. Tolkien notes that the Balrogs served as enforcers within Angband, ensuring the loyalty of Morgoth's other servants. Their whips of flame were tools of punishment as much as war, capable of incinerating flesh and spirit alike. When they finally emerged in open battle, as during the fall of Gondolin in 510 of the First Age, they unleashed devastation that no army of elves or men could withstand. Yet their dormancy within Angband speaks to Morgoth's calculated strategy. He preserved them as his ultimate weapons, a terrifying surprise for his enemies. Though not located within Angband itself, the Helcarax, the grinding ice that lay between Aman and Middle-earth, was influenced by Morgoth's will. This perilous wasteland became the stage for one of his most effective strategies, dividing the Noldor during their pursuit of him. The Silmarillion recounts how Feanor, consumed by his oath, abandoned Fingolfin's host to cross the Helcarax without ships, leaving them to make the journey on foot. Morgoth's mastery over the natural elements meant that the ice itself seemed to rise against the Noldor, taking the lives of countless elves. This was no mere coincidence. Morgoth's malice tainted the very land, turning it into a graveyard for his pursuers. This manipulation of geography demonstrates the breadth of Morgoth's influence. His power extended beyond his fortress, reshaping the world itself to serve his purposes. Amid all his power, Morgoth's greatest secret was his fear. Despite his immense strength and cunning, Morgoth was deeply afraid of the Valar and their eventual judgment. This fear manifested in his paranoia and need for control. He fortified Angband obsessively, creating layers of defenses and filling it with loyal servants. Yet, even this could not silence his inner dread. The eventual arrival of Eärendil and the host of the Valar in Fae 545 revealed the depth of Morgoth's fears. Despite his preparations, his armies faltered before the might of the Valar, and Morgoth was captured. His defeat and chaining signaled not only the end of the First Age, but also the ultimate exposure of his vulnerabilities. In the end, Morgoth's fear became his undoing. A poetic justice that reverberated through the ages. While Ungoliant's primary role in Morgoth's narrative lay in the destruction of the two trees, her progeny played a far darker and ongoing role within Angband. After Ungoliant fled from Morgoth's betrayal, many of her spawn, creatures of shadow and venom, found their way to his fortress. These monstrous spiders were employed in the deeper caverns of Angband, weaving webs that turned light into darkness. It is possible that these creatures contributed to Morgoth's experimentation with shadow itself. In Tolkien's mythology, shadow is not merely the absence of light, but an active force, a manifestation of Morgoth's malice. The webs of Ungoliant's descendants may have provided a key to furthering this corruption. The Silmarillion subtly hints that Morgoth's realm was a twisted reflection of Ungoliant's lairs, suggesting that her influence lingered long after their alliance ended. Morgoth's crowning achievement, placing the Silmarils in his iron crown, was also his ultimate blasphemy. These jewels, forged by Feanor from the light of the two trees, were sacred objects of unparalleled beauty. Yet within Angband, they became symbols of domination and despair. The crown itself, forged in mockery of the thrones of the Valar, was both a literal and figurative weight upon Morgoth. The jewels burned his flesh unceasingly, but he refused to remove them, as their pain symbolized his rebellion. There is a hidden irony in this act. While Morgoth sought to assert his control, the Silmarils themselves remained untouchable, their purity rejecting his essence. The jewel's light burned brighter in captivity, illuminating the moral and spiritual decay of their captor. This paradox reveals Morgoth's misunderstanding of creation. He could dominate and destroy, but he could not truly possess or corrupt that which was inherently good. Of all Morgoth's captives, none suffered more profoundly than Húrin, father of Turin Turambar. After his capture during the Nernear Tunwadayad, Húrin was brought to Angband, where Morgoth sought to break him through prolonged torment. Yet Morgoth's methods went beyond physical suffering. He subjected Húrin to a spiritual ordeal, forcing him to witness the unfolding tragedy of his family, cursed by Morgoth's malice. Húrin was released years later, but not as an act of mercy. Morgoth unleashed him upon the world as a living weapon, a man broken in spirit who would unwittingly spread despair. This psychological manipulation marked a shift in Morgoth's strategies. Where brute force failed, he turned to subtler, more insidious methods. The story of Húrin and his children underscores Morgoth's ability to corrupt even the noblest hearts, amplifying the tragedy of the First Age. Among the most terrifying secrets of Angband was Morgoth's connection to the void itself. Unlike Sauron, who sought dominion over the material world, Morgoth's ultimate ambition was to return all creation to the state of nothingness from which it arose. This was not simply an act of destruction, but a fundamental negation of Ilúvatar's work, a rejection of the music of the Ainur. The Silmarillion and Tolkien's letters suggest that Morgoth's time in the void before creation shaped his outlook. He sought the flame imperishable, believing it would grant him the power to create life independently. Failing this, he turned to destruction as a means of asserting his dominance. Within Angband, Morgoth conducted rituals and experiments aimed at bridging the gap between Arda and the void, using his servants as pawns in his quest for ultimate annihilation. The whispers of these experiments would haunt even his most loyal followers. He sighed. Morgoth's capture at the end of the War of Wrath did not erase his influence. As he was cast into the void, his malice seeped into the fabric of Arda itself. This phenomenon, often referred to as Morgoth's residue, ensured that his corruption would endure long after his physical defeat. The poisoned lands of Middle-earth, the lingering fear of shadow, and the innate flaws in its inhabitants all bear traces of Morgoth's will. This revelation reframes the struggles of later ages, including Sauron's rise to power. Morgoth's defeat was incomplete, for his legacy persisted, subtly influencing events and ensuring that the scars of the First Age would never fully heal. The knowledge that Angband's horrors shaped the course of history underscores the depth of Morgoth's victory, even in defeat. Angband was not merely a fortress but a crucible of evil, a place where Morgoth's hatred for creation reached its zenith. The secrets buried within its depths reveal a being who sought not only to dominate, but to unravel the very fabric of existence. Morgoth's legacy, shaped in the fires of Angband, casts a long shadow over the history of Middle-earth, a reminder that even the most terrible evils leave echoes that cannot be silenced.